CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. So you were telling me this story, Chris, about how you even got exposed to or knew of MaintainX.
Yeah, it's a interesting story, Greg. I years in manufacturing. I no matter what the project was, whether it was capital equipment or software, one of my check boxes was always references. And early on, as I was looking at a CMMS, a modern CMMS cloud-based solution, in my last role as director of manufacturing, I really started, like everyone, looking at what the analysts are evaluating, what people are saying, some of those references. And there were some new folks in this legacy CMMS space, right? And one of them was MaintainX. I wasn't familiar. It was a startup company in 2018. So, and this was in 2019. I made, down to my final three selections. And so I reached out to the leadership at MaintainX and said, I want to come meet with you. And I was in Northern California. Company I was with had a facility there doing my quarterly business review. And so I went up to San Francisco and met two of the founders of the company and spent about 3 or 4 hours with them to the point where, it's one of those things when you're looking at your user requirements document and discovery, but it's another thing to then go up to a rooftop in San Francisco Bay and just talk to people and understand that they're passionate about helping frontline workers in this knowledge space. And so, yeah, I not only used their product for 4 years, but here I am. I ended up joining the team.
Yeah, I love all of these different stories, and I'll always say that on the episodes because I'm imagining it and it's reminding me of, maybe things from my journey or things I've talked about with other folks on CMMS radio when we do the episodes. And I wanted to start out there because what I love most about it is that you were looking for technology, seeking out technology, you're in the manufacturing space, and then you go and actually meet them. And then 4 or 5 years later, you're there, part of their organization. So you can essentially, right, put it all together. So, um, real quick, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Today, we got a cool episode. We've been working on getting this on the schedule for a little while. We're going to meet with Chris Hutson, and he is with MaintainX. He's the director of Lifecycle and Manufacturing Solutions at MaintainX. But as you will hear in this story and throughout, the the background that he has is what I'm always interested in getting to, and then kind of tying that into what we're all doing out here. We're on this maintenance management journey. CMMS is a big part of it. I'm passionate about that, but there's so many things related to it. So first and foremost, Chris, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on today.
It is my pleasure. Sorry about that. I had to sneeze. You were telling me this background story, and one of my first questions is typically going to be, how did this journey really start for you? Not just what you were already talking about, but if you could kind of take us back. You've had a career where you've been in manufacturing, you've been in life cycle, you've been director of manufacturing, all these things tie together. So can you share with us, going back as far as you want to, your journey and how it even started, what inspired you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for those young engineers that are trying to determine, for me, it was even switching disciplines from chemical to industrial engineering, but determining, what do they want to do in life? And for me, I was always passionate about building things and problem solving, right? That's a big emphasis of engineering. But early on in my career as a manufacturing engineer, I became, I guess, pretty effective at developing, scoping, implementing capital projects to the point where some of those, as they become highly technical in automation, you become sort of the subject matter expert. You might be with a project for 6 months or a year, and it's full discovery and implementation. And so, ironically, at some point, I was asked, Chris, you seem to be working best with our maintenance technicians around not only implementing some of these complex projects, but supporting them ongoing. Would you want to run maintenance? And I was like, well, it was kind of a crossroads of manufacturing management. And I felt like if you can get in at the ground up and really understand all the critical assets in a manufacturing organization, cross functionally understand operations, OT, IT, and then, of course, the lifeline of a manufacturing organization are optimizing its assets. So I had the privilege of really spending 5 or 6 years as a maintenance manager across the 3 shift operation and really understanding what it takes to kind of move from a reactive maintenance organization to a proactive one. And a lot of, I think, maintenance has evolved in that way from a reactive indirect cost center. And I remember always having to report, what are your indirect costs this month? And are you staying under budget on your maintenance, expenditures, to really to a function today that can deliver a competitive advantage. It can really be the catalyst for organizations looking to move into digital transformation. And so, we can talk about what are some of those things in the current landscape that allow maintenance organizations to do that.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that. One of the things we're always out here wrestling with, and when I say we, it's you, it's me, it's people looking for solutions, it's people delivering the solutions, and there's this kind of overarching theme where we want this to be looked at differently, and it's still a challenge to this day when it comes to the business as a whole and the maintenance teams themselves that are there to contribute in major ways to our ultimate throughput, our profitability. So they really are an integral part of the business. I want to ask, from your side, being now in the seat of the provider, where you get to kind of connect with all different levels of people, drive this kind of value proposition, why you should be on a journey of digitization, or what I call a CMMS journey, because that's a part of it. Do you find that your specific background and having been there, done it, been at different levels as the end user is important, not just for you, but for various team members when it comes to understanding clients and how they can make these cases for connecting this to the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that, as engineers, we sometimes want to solve complex problems, right? That's by nature. Sometimes with complex solutions, and those complex solutions aren't always easily manageable by the teams that have to execute work. So I feel like today's modern cloud-based maintenance management systems really do provide that knowledge base where the frontline workers have the ability to have a single pane of glass to not only execute work, but to participate in the entire operation, as a true force in increasing productivity, by improved asset availability, lowering cost, and be an active participant in those KPIs that the rest of the operational team are striving.
Do you think when it comes to those KPIs, I have you seen where there really still to this day is a different set of KPIs for different, I'm going to say, levels or parts of the organization? And we'll imagine we're talking about a manufacturing environment of essentially any kind. And the maintenance team, like you said early on, is still just constantly looked at as that cost center, that and we know it's a cost center, but it's also a really big contributor. Do you still see that as a major issue? And on top of that, do you get to work with your team at MaintainX to give them lots of information so that they can better understand how to help the clients make those cases?
Yeah, certainly, and I think because with the advent of these modern mobile maintenance management systems, we're able to bring maintenance into the forefront where they are participating with the entire operational readiness programs in terms of actively driving and moving the needle on those KPIs. And those KPIs can be maintenance focused in terms of percent complete on work orders and moving up that maintenance pyramid and out of calendar based maintenance into more conditional, predictive, and even prescriptive maintenance. But I think when it comes to I'm a disciple of lean, so when it comes to the dashboard around safety, quality, delivery, and cost, I firmly believe that because of the real time mobile maintenance management systems that are at this point integrated into the rest of the ecosystem, that they're actually contributing to those aligned KPIs.
That's, you mentioned being, a proponent of or disciple of lean philosophies. And I believe you are a lean Six Sigma black belt
Just
and
green, just green.
just green. Okay. When it comes to applying lean, right? Because there's lots of different approaches you can take. Why are you so passionate about it? And then how does that really lend well, not to what you do now, but what you did then when it came to implementing CMMS technology into these environments?
Yeah, these foundations all relate. When you talk about lean around rapid problem solving, and having real time data with high quality data to help make those kinds of decisions. But it kind of goes back to one of the things that I really think a lot of maintenance management systems should employ are scorecards around like 5S. So again, one of the foundations of lean, but housekeeping is inspection, inspection's detection, and then detection becomes correction as part of that rapid problem solving. So to have a system that allows people to go out, say for instance, and do a 5S audit where you have a cross-functional team do that all in the same mobile grid, and to hit the easy button to generate that inspection report real time, and particularly if there's any kind of compliance or safety findings within that 5S, that an automatic work order is created to run that to ground and ensure that those compliance issues are addressed then and there.
The big theme, when we talk about this, that I'm constantly reminded of is how important getting information now really is, but it also has to be in the right context. And what I'm getting to here is when we deal with digitization, we're really talking about data and awareness kind of combined. And, we understand what it contributes to when it comes to maintenance teams being able to do what they do that allows the business to thrive. Do you find that still to this day there's misunderstanding within teams that have to adopt technology as to what their own role is? Do they sometimes not have an awareness to that? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, certainly. I think that goes back to the change management of software implementation, right? We've all seen it done not so well, and we've maybe been fortunate to participate on software projects that have really had a clear project charter. Maybe an A3 document that not only did you understand, the why of we're trying to implement this, but what's in it for me, what's in it for the organization, and how will we know, when we've had success. So I think that is important, and communicating frequently around the implementation and the progress. I really like having those kinds of KPIs that at the end of the week or even at the end of the day, when you're doing your team stand up, you can say, did we win today? Did we win this week? And everybody feels like they had, a factor in influencing that outcome.
Yeah, that's certainly when we talk about bringing in technology. So let's, like skip the selection part. Now you've got it, you've implemented it, people are adopting it. Creating that feedback loop actually allows the front line specifically, because I'm always concerned about the front line, because if you don't get the inputs, you have no shot at getting the outputs, just none. It really is that simple. You might get a little bit, but it's not going to necessarily be beneficial. But if we create that feedback loop, we now have some built-in assurances, if you will. Because if I'm a frontline worker, an operator, whatever it might be, and you're asking me to do something, and let's say you've communicated the why and I've bought in. I'm like, yeah, that's I agree. We got to do this. When I, in that role, see that management actually wants to have that awareness, not just to babysit me or to tell me to go and do something. We told you to do it. We sign your check, but it's more like, wow, we're using it too. When we on the front line see that, and that feedback loop goes in both directions, right? Now you get further buy-in, and it starts to almost take on a life of its own, where you don't have to babysit it as much. So I like that as a process. I want to switch it to very specifically IIoT and how that fits in when it comes to overall digitization, because you've written about this in the past, and it's one of the areas where at one point in your career you saw that as where to really drive some value, to really find some gains within the organization you were at the time, is what influenced that. But how then does that fit into the CMMS, so that we can kind of tie it right in there?
Yeah, that's a certainly top of mind in the industry right now. It's a low barrier to entry in terms of cost now for devices. It's something that can be implemented quickly. You get a magnetic Wi-Fi device, or you add it to your internal network. Where we are right now, it's even providing bundles for customers depending on if they're looking at accelerometers, for vibration, temperature, pressure. I always advocate, developing a full roadmap for that kind of um, ecosystem around connected systems and assets. So it starts with sometimes simplifying before you automate, and that is, are you using manual meters and things that you're inspecting today? Every time you touch a lift truck, are you recording hours? If it's a machine, do you record cycles? Do you start getting into pressures and production units of measure from those assets that you can quantify and trend, and even use some tools like we incorporate anomaly detection. It's a simple AI tool that says, I don't think that data point is in your range. Is this a true reading? And then it's more around, yes, identifying the Pareto of critical assets at top 15 or 20% that the team has, collaboratively identified as those critical assets that you want to track more discreetly. And so you can do that with IoT. You can start to look at, up the connectivity pyramid in terms of SCADA and even PLC, machine language, and then even potentially integrating that into your ERP system, right? In terms of order management and schedule for OEE. So I think it's, working with, I spend time working with our clients around where they are in that journey. For myself personally, implementing that, bi-directionally integrating to a SCADA system, so that, hey, we all take our car in, for say an oil change. It's been a while since I've changed my own oil. Uh, and so you see the Duran charts, right? The red, yellow, green, where you are based on hours or cycles, or some driver. And it's the same thing in the manufacturing environment. It's to really understand where the equipment is around predicting performance and to try to be proactive with optimizing the asset. So for myself, there was some legacy equipment that was not PLC controlled or PC based. Some of them either had like EPROMs or even were full hydraulic mechanical machines. And so just putting cycle counters or temperature or pressure devices on those easily allowed to really monitor asset health. So I think it's the short answer. It's more of a custom solution on based on your operating environment and where you are in that journey.
I like the last part most particularly because if we think of it in terms of that journey where you're at as an organization and a team when it comes to maintenance maturity, if you will, if you're really ready for this technology, as much as we may know what it could do, if you're not ready for that technology, it very likely would do the opposite, create too much of a distraction, a disruption. Have you found when it comes to maybe at those early levels when an organization either has a legacy system that doesn't really kind of meet the current trends and what's possible, or they don't even have a system at all, that when a project moves forward, is there a risk period that you've seen or can kind of speak to when it comes to they've made the decision, they're moving forward, they're in deployment, and there's a risk of that kind of falling off where I've always described it as it's almost like the whole team, the company that got the system feels like, oh, okay, we finally finished that project and we selected and we've implemented a CMMS platform. Is that the window, or is there something else to it in your experience where there's a potential for it to fall off?
No, I think you've identified a classic example of sort of project management and implementation is, and it goes back to maybe lean. That fourth and fifth S are always the toughest to standardize and sustain. So because you've had a successful proof of concept, that's just a good indicator that okay, this team can achieve this. Now let's really standardize that practice from our lessons learned, and then let's keep a cross-functional team together so that we can now sustain and really adopt this across the enterprise. I think that's where many of those type of project failures occur, is the lack of continued improvement.
Interesting. So as you're describing that, and I think about all these things, lean or theory of constraints and all this different stuff. There's different things that are quite similar, useful. So while you're describing that, I was thinking about ADCAR. Are you familiar with ADCAR? And the R, and the R is reinforcement. So it reminds me of that when you get to that stage where we're almost talking about that feedback loop
All
so
right.
that people are not just bought in. It's not a trick, it's a best practice because it keeps people included. Think about, God, I don't know, it's football season. Everybody's talking about all kinds of crazy stuff with football, right? Well, what if you took out a key component of that represents that same type of a thing? And maybe players were allowed to miss a couple of post game meetings, that happen on like Monday or Tuesday. How disruptive that can be if you don't have something in place and people aren't doing it. That's where the accountability comes in too. Do you want to tell us what Asset Connect is and why it doesn't matter? That's a hell of a segue, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's something that we're very passionate about. I think, in short, Asset Connect is an entirely new platform designed, right now in beta, but to be agnostic at some point in future, which would improve this collaboration between maintenance and operational teams around optimizing asset performance and the OEMs that provide those assets. So, one of the things when I was a customer, I used to have to a pain point for a client is to digitize all of that asset collateral, the manuals, the maintenance schedules, the maintenance procedures that fit your duty cycles and environment, the recommended spares, all the vendor data and key drawings. And so we're giving the clients an easy button that the OEMs are actually pre-building those digital assets to deploy into a maintenance management system. And more importantly, in MaintainX, we have over 5 million assets in the platform. And so a lot of OEMs are sort of flying blind once they commission a system or an asset, and unless they're boots in the field calling on those customers, they maybe are flying blind around what kind of work is being performed on those assets, what kind of parts are being utilized. And so what we're doing is providing a digital link to that asset back to the OEM. In fact, where we can share real-time asset and parts inventory analytics to the OEM, and allow the customer, I guess the last thing, for them to reach out for technical support within the app, so they can stay in that kind of single pane of glass where they do work on a daily basis. That's where they live, and so they can coordinate directly and ask for technical support to the OEM in that tool. Um, so it's exciting, Greg. I know you've been in the industry for years and you've seen a lot of technology evolve. What are some of those kinds of big shifts that you've seen in terms of the advances in tech stack, or things that you feel are moving the industry forward?
Well, I think that's a complicated question because it can go in so many directions. So I recently had a conversation similar to this, slightly different, but it was around this idea of what has changed, what has remained the same, and these technology advancements. So, first of all, anything that's AI based, I'm kind of in the, I don't know if I want to say skeptic category. It's more like, hey, let's be careful here. It's machine learning, it's programmatic in nature. It has to be taught, it has to be managed. It's not a fully autonomous type thing that so many people think it is. And I'm a little bit staunch on that. Um, I don't know how that comes off. What I have seen is the technology is better in that user adoption has a higher probability of actually happening because there's less complication in the deployment. And that sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo that I just said, but the biggest challenge that I've always seen, and I don't think that's going to change, is in having the right cultures in place and having teams that understand their process. But there's advancement in the technology when it comes to how quickly a deployment can take place. Now, that doesn't mean we hit the switch and you're good to go and you're done, because that one thing keeps coming back. But I think that has changed a little bit. There's information that's being packaged up a little bit better. And I think it's because the technology has the people on the technology side involved in a way where you have maintenance and reliability professionals at some of these different CMMS providers that are involved in making it matter, rather than, hey, we created a cool new shiny thing, buy this, buy this. It's more about, yeah, that may or may not happen. What are we doing when we actually get engaged? And I think that's what I've seen. The technological advances are really around how the leveraging of condition monitoring can really make an impact. But there again, I'm kind of staunch about, don't censor everything. I want you to censor your critical assets. And I want that to be based on, some kind of an assessment, an actual real assessment that has some kind of substance within it as to why that's taking place. So I'm trying to answer without answering, if you can tell.
No, no, I think you're right. It's not a AI is not a placebo. CBM, conditional based maintenance. You're exactly right. It's just like a SCADA system. You can have so many tags and so many sensors that it just becomes noise.
Yeah.
And that's where the human side of it is. that knowledge worker and team that understands what are the most critical assets and the most critical failure modes or data that we want to monitor, as opposed to just flooding everything. And that's with AI, it's also making sure you have that case based reasoning and knowledge base, because otherwise AI could be, I'm just out Google searching solutions,
Yeah,
and it could be
yeah.
very misleading.
My biggest concern when it comes to the way we leverage technology has always been that it's almost an attempt to minimize human involvement, because somehow that's going to benefit us if our team members can be doing other things. Now that's both true and untrue all at the same time, and that's why I danced around it so much, because it's it's really, I'm just worried that people will get lazy and treat things as easy buttons, which a lot of times they just don't exist. They're cool for marketing, they're cool for selling software, and I have to be careful with that too, because I try to serve this industry on both sides, like I said. So it's interesting that you asked that question, because it kind of puts me on the spot. That's kind of fun. I like it. Yeah. What it and here's the other thing
Well,
is, if I'm not right, even if I'm concerned about being right, because I want to offer the right kind of guidance out there, I've got a lot of people that I'm connected to that will say, "Hey, no, you were kind of right," or "No, you missed this," and I'm cool with that, because that's going to help people. It helps me. I get to learn from all kinds of different people.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it's all part of our benchmarking.
absolutely, absolutely. So, here's a question around that culture and process. Does a CMMS, in your view or experience, have a role in shaping culture and process, or do those need to be in place first before you bring in a CMMS platform?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I think people tend to delay implementation of there's large industries that are still, on paper, and or very legacy based maintenance management systems. And I feel like, one of the things that we really focus on are quick and successful implementations, quick being 4 weeks or less. And so when people think about that in software, they're maybe used to the implementations that take 6 months to a year. So I feel the answer is yes, because a CMMS can provide that real-time data and insight that can generate those outcomes that you were describing, and to do it where there is a collaborative force between maintenance operations and everyone involved in those aligned KPIs that we discussed. The like some of the messaging tools that we have within our app, so that there's seamless collaboration across teams, very just like a Microsoft Teams channel would be, so that you're basically soliciting support from a cross-functional team, and you're reducing that noise. You're only enlisting support from those people that are experts, let's say, in that particular problem solving. And that's the thing that I think a modern CMMS does, is it moves you on the continuum of operational excellence.
That that's really kind of the pinnacle, if you can get to that, and you should be striving for that. And maybe not every organization on the planet or every facility on the planet needs to go quite to that level of continual process improvement. And it's a strange argument I try to make there, but there are instances where the benefit is not worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze on paper, and all that. There's a lot of intangibles too. So I think what's really interesting, speaking of the technology and what it can do now, is if you're working with the right people with that technology, you actually understand it, and it can be very specific to you, not just your industry. I think that's where you get in the kind of best situation when it comes to how we're leveraging all of our technology stacks, saying multiple systems that might be integrated and talking to one another, with our people and our process, now you're really going. And I too think that CMMS in and of itself can help to turn the corner on culture and getting towards maintenance excellence. But we have to be careful with that because, again, I'm always going to go back and say, look, it's not an easy button. But first and foremost, if you were at a manufacturing facility and I asked you, you know, can you tell me how many assets you have and which ones are classified as this criticality and how often it has been worked on? Can you tell me how many times it failed in the last 6 months? If you can't answer those questions and you don't have a system in place that's going to help you do that, you need to get a system that's going to help you understand and know that, because that's like knowing things about your business that are critical to how it's running and what it's producing and all that kind of stuff. So we can start going round and round and round. It's kind of like a marble on a sombrero. And I like to do the occasional signal disrupt where I'm calling people out on, hey, your stuff's not, it's not magic. It's not a, it's not a unicorn firing, lasers that are looking like rainbows. You got to put the work in, and you can't take a hit it and forget it approach with most of it. Want to switch gears? There's always a fun question segment on CMMS Radio. I'd like to do that with you right now.
Rapid fire, huh? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And there are no wrong answers here. So this is just an opportunity for us to have a little bit of fun, get to know you, and then I'm probably going to pepper you up with a few more at the end here. So, fun question number one. What is your favorite music?
I'm a classic '80s rock and roll guy.
That'll work. That'll work. Would so you if I rattle off a band name like Rat, you know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, that might be. I try not to dabble too much in almost borderline heavy metal.
Okay.
More, and I could even, I guess, even like Foreigner and some of that kind of
That works.
music.
That works. That works. Fun question number two is, what is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one you like to watch, follow, and support.
Yeah, I'm an avid American soccer fan, or football. Our whole family. So several of my children have been fortunate to help pay their college educations that way, like I did, and I just feel like it's the classic team thinking team sport, and it's continuous. So yeah, soccer.
All right. All right. Now, here's the big one on the fun question segment. No wrong answers here. What is your philosophy, approach, opinion, perspective, anything at all on the concept of work life balance?
That's an interesting one. I think classically as Americans, we tend to work live to work instead of work to live. And I know in manufacturing it's somehow difficult to diffuse. I mentioned that maintenance role I was in. That was 24/7, 365. I mean, calls out, three shift operation, and I think just by nature of industry, it doesn't shut down very often. So I think it's a cultural solution at the leadership level of a company to ensure that there is that work life balance and that you have a team deep enough to support each other and understand that people do need some downtime.
All right. All right. I like it. I like it. And I like it because it gets us thinking. That's really what it's all about. It's not about being right. It's more about how can we look at this? So that's why I ask those questions anyway. And the first two are kind of, pretty easy. And that third one is a tougher. It's still fun, but it's also a useful type of a question because the answers get us thinking. So, switching back to the platform, I want to ask, when it comes to MaintainX technology, further developments, what's on the horizon that you're allowed to share?
Yeah, I think, for one, it's important that organizations have a forward thinking product roadmap. And so, at MaintainX, there's two versions of that, right? One that we share frequently with our customers. And part of the reason is the influence on the direction and priority and even content of that roadmap comes from that customer centric approach. And then there's an internal version, right? More around requirements and implementation of that roadmap. So I think it's heavily focused right now on um, intelligence, and that's both asset and worker intelligence. When you think about AI, most people tend to think about the machine version of that, but we're squarely focused on kind of the confluence of both asset and worker intelligence and around that asset optimization.
Good, good. And another one I had here noted down is, what is the most difficult part of deploying a CMMS platform? Your experience and opinion.
Yeah, it varies depending on, again, the client's current status. Honestly, sometimes it's easier to implement those organizations that are coming from a paper-based, clipboard-based environment. Um, and so, the other one is those clients that were migrating off, another system. But it all starts with, digitizing, really understanding the client's organization, what their metrics are. At the end of it, like you said, outcomes are around metrics. So we want to make sure our reporting module is going to capture that key data that they want to visualize. So I think it's then building the asset structure and their organization based on user permissions, and doing that all with some input from the customer, right, around that discovery. And then for us, it's having a team that is squarely focused on implementations and then ongoing customer support.
Yeah, and I think those are all, in a lot of ways, classic things that you want to have in place, that you want to be aware of, and knowing what those challenges are. And then when you overcome those, I always throw one in there. This isn't MaintainX centric. This is just across the board, generally speaking, that you have to be mindful and have some kind of contingency plan when it comes to your champions on both sides. Because let's say you've got uh, one department or another that's part of a critical client that's at an enterprise level, the revenue's huge. You got to have documentation and awareness as to why that client is leveraging your platform in the first place, so that you can have somebody step in instead of just parachuting in and starting to do stuff the way they do it. I think on the client side, you need similar things in place so that somebody could take over if somebody levels up, moves on. Maybe they have to move into a different position and let go of the CMMS right now, and you have no opportunity to have that ongoing communication and support from that individual. Maybe they retired and, like, straight up, hey, I'm out. You won't be able to call me because I'm going to sail around the world with my family, whatever it is, right? So having contingency plans is really important, because, again, you can start to sleep at the wheel as this technology is working well for you, and you have to be careful of that. So I wanted to throw that on top.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
it's always project management 101, planning contingency.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so much more we could talk about. I want to be mindful of our time and how long the episode is. But first of all, I want to thank you for being here with me. For anybody out there, if you want to get in touch with Chris, it's Chris Hutson, Hutson, and you can find him on LinkedIn. And of course, MaintainX, pretty easy to find. They're out there. You just do a Google search for MaintainX, put it all together, and you could go to maintainx.com. And is there still getmaintainx.com out there?
There is, yeah. Either one of those will get you to our URL, and we look forward to seeing anyone in our community environment. Also, you don't necessarily have to be a current or prospective customer. We'd love to hear people just in the space, like you, Greg, just kind of raising the watermarks and getting us all benchmarking on important things that affect all of us.
Yeah, well, the nice thing about the community that you guys launched, and there's kind of a trend towards that these days now, where there's a lot of communities out there. By participating and asking questions or offering an opinion, maybe not even a perfect one, we want to get people thinking and talking and dialoguing, because that helps us all to figure out, what could I be doing differently? Maybe for you and your entire global team, what have we overlooked, or what could we change about our solutionizing that makes a better impact for this type of company or that type of company? And we just have to keep these conversations going. And that's why I'm so thankful for the time today. And that's why, again, I want to thank you for being here with me on CMMS Radio.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.